Hello and welcome back to another one of my YouTube tutorials, this time again Guitar Secrets, and we're going to focus on an 80s player today, of a player who was a very big inspiration on my playing, whose band was very influential to me back in the 80s and 90s. We're going to talk about Robert Smith of The Cure. The Cure, I don't think they need further introduction. They're a very, very famous new wave post-punk band from England, and Robert Smith is their founder, and well, he was the only guitar player at first, and then later on added second guitar players, but we're going to focus on his playing today. I'm going to explain his key techniques and talk a little bit about his sound. So sit back and enjoy the Guitar Secrets of Robert Smith. The first thing we're going to talk about, the first technique I'm going to show you, is Robert's use of fingering. He doesn't employ the fingering you would normally learn in a guitar lesson, like all those scales, A major being here. Yeah. Robert has a very unique approach. He doesn't play the scales as you normally learn them. A good example is the intro to Pictures of You. I'm going to show you that. And that is not how you would normally play it. If you were to stay in the scales you've learned in your guitar lesson, this is the A major scale, and you would play it like this. But Robert doesn't do that. Instead, he goes, stays on the D string, and now he's changing strings because he has to. So what he basically does, he stays on one string as long as he can. And he only takes another string if he really, really needs to, like in the midsection of the song. Another key technique Robert employs a lot is the use of open strings. This is not very surprising, as most post-punk players of the era did so. Open strings were commonly used to create drones or rings in the background and producing consonant and dissonant intervals. And that's basically what Robert does as well. But what he does also is to combine that with the other technique I just showed you of, well, staying on one string as much as you can, basically. And he does this in the riff in Love Song, where he goes. And here in the last notes, you can see that this, well, it's not a pleasant interval, is it? It's a second. What he does is he plays, but, well, he keeps it all on the B string, uses the same finger, and lets the open E string ring out. And so he produces certain intervals like major third, the second, which is a little bit dissonant here, unison, second again, and here it resolves to the major third and the root. So this riff plays with tension and release, all supplied by the open E string. Another famous example where he does this, he uses the open E string as a drone and then goes down the A major scale on the B string, is the intro to Just Like Heaven, a piece which I covered a lot with my high school band when I was very, very younger. Let's see if I can remember it. And if you've watched my finger, you might have seen that I'm just going down the A major scale on the B string, and the whole time you hit the open E string. And of course, this also creates intervals consonant and dissonant and what have you, and plays with suspension and release. The first interval is a major sixth. Then you go perfect fifth, perfect fourth, major third. And here you have it again, the second. Unison, second, but this time the B string is the lower note. Major third, perfect fourth. And here we have the root note, which would give the perfect fifth again. So you basically go through all of the intervals from the major sixth to the unison and back. And this is how this riff works. And all the intervals are created by the open E string ringing throughout the entire riff. What is the next key element we're going to take a look at? Well, we must not forget that The Cure come from sort of a punk environment because they were one of the first post-punk bands to hit the scene in the late 70s. And of course, the approach of punk rock was to turn back everything onto basics, to not play these complicated scales and riffs and long solos, just some guitar chords. And Robert's playing, of course, is heavily inspired from that approach to guitar playing. And especially on the first records, you find examples of the technique I'm going to show you now. Robert basically takes strumming chords he would play on Campfire acoustic guitar, puts it on the electric and makes little riffs and melodies out of it, like in A Play for Today. And you see, I'm just strumming it like it was an acoustic guitar, like I'm sitting by the campfire, but it's an electric guitar. You've got the clean sound, though. Robert doesn't employ distortion on the first Cure albums. But you see, it's just chord strumming, but still it creates that melody. But it's played with a chord. And, well, that is really done a lot on the first 2 or 3 Cure albums. Like on the first Cure album, Three Imaginary Boys, he goes like this. And these are all just basic chords. You've got the E minor, but he plays it like that. Then he goes to G major, B major, sorry, and B major 7. But he always does it like bass drum snare. Boom, boom, zack, and you got... Yeah, and that is how Three Imaginary Boys work. And you see that you've got all these simple chords and you can make riffs out of them by not really doing much. You add a little bit of melody like in the Play for Today. Or you've got a bit of rhythm in there, like... And that is heavily inspired by punk rock, actually. Okay, so let's lose a few words on Robert's sound. Robert had a special kind of setup like every post-punk player who respected himself would have. He would do something special to his rig, make it less like the rigs of the rock gods of the 70s, make it less like a lead player, type style of thing. And, well, basically, during the first Cure recordings, he played a Roland Jazz Chorus, the JC120, which is a solid state amp, and it was hugely popular among post-punk players. John McKeoch by the Siouxsie and the Banshees used one. Robert used one, of course. Wayne Hussey used one in Sisters of Mercy and The Mission. So that was a very, very popular amp in the post-punk community. Robert's guitar, however, was a different story. He had a very cheap guitar he ordered by mail, and, well, that broke down a lot, and then eventually got his first professional guitar, which was a Fender Jazzmaster. Fender Jazzmasters, of course, were very unusual guitars, late 70s, early 80s, and these odd guitars, these oddly shaped guitars, were really loved by the punk rock and new wave and post-punk community, and he was a very inspiring player with the Jazzmaster. So he plugged his Jazzmaster into the solid-state Roland GC 120, and as if that was not unrock enough. He would actually take a single coil out of his cheap old guitar and put it in the middle of the two P90 pickups in his Jazzmaster. And so he had a middle single coil, and he played his stuff lots of times on that. 17 seconds, for example, you hear these middle single coil on the Jazzmaster, which a regular Jazzmaster, of course, doesn't have. And pedals, well, very easy for Robert. All his pedals were basically Boss pedals. He had the Boss Overdrive, the Boss Chorus, and the Boss what have you. He once said, well, these little pedals, they've got colors, and I can see the colors on stage and I know what to hit. But I think they contributed to his sound. And if you're talking about the sound of The Cure, you are, of course, talking flangers. Flangers are very, very important aspect of the sound Robert has on like all the Cure albums. I think actually the flanger I would prefer when I try to emulate Robert's sound now is that one. That is a BF2, of course, by Boss, the flanger. I got it in the 80s, actually. I am that old. It's an old 80s model. It has got different knobs now, but these are a little bit loose, but it still works. So this is an unbelievably cool flanger. I think this is the best flanger ever. Although all the ADA and MXR people will probably crucify me now, but this is my favorite flanger, and I bought it because Robert used it. Nowadays, Robert has got a custom guitar by Schecter done for him, which is up to his specs. Haven't really seen or played it. Well, I've seen it on a Cure concert, but I never played it myself. And he doesn't use the Roland Jazz Chorus anymore. You see him with Roland Cubes though, but primarily the Cure use Supro amps now. Okay, that was all. That was my little tutorial on Robert Smith's Guitar Secrets. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, drop me a like, write some comments, what I did wrong in this video. Well, maybe you want to subscribe my channel for more content. And for all you Line 6 Helix guys, I've got a preset on custom tone. So that's all for today. And see you next time. Enjoy playing guitar in the meantime.